Think about the best software engineer colleagues you've worked with in your career. What made them the best? Were they technically the best, or were they technically very strong but exceptional at the soft skills? From almost all the engineers that I've spoken with, it's the latter. Why? Because similar to any role, the soft skills are essential and critical to your success. So, in this video, we are really going to focus in on some of the communication soft skills that engineers want to focus in on during the interviews. And we're really going to focus with the user in mind, and that can be an internal or external user. So, with all the layoffs going on in big tech, an overall reduction in openings because of these layoffs and the pace of AI, these soft skills are going to be more critical than ever. So let's start very briefly and very quickly with an item that is just missing from the other videos and articles on software engineer soft skills. These are the nonverbal skills. And I want to go super high level, but when focusing in on your soft skills as a software engineer, bring massive awareness to your body language. Shoulders back, head up, really good eye contact, and bring in a smile every once in a while. That's going to bring some really good positivity into the interview. A couple of other areas I want you to focus in on. Specifically, it comes to pace, pitch, and tone. These are essential items. And then to break it down even further, are you speaking too fast or too slow? And does your pitch and tone come across as positive? Not all engineers speak positively, not anybody in any role, so make sure that it comes across really positive. And here's where you can improve all these items. When you use any of these platforms or you're practicing with anybody else, other engineers, simply tell them before you get started, hey, I really want to work on my body language. So here are a few items I'd love for you to look out for, and ask them if they want that feedback from you as well. These nonverbal items are critical and make up a larger percentage of our communication than our words. So really, really helpful. The last item I just want to note, it's a little bit off, but just space. One of the pieces of communication that's critical is space. So just slow down a little bit. Instead of diving right into the answer, make sure you restate the question and just ask your interviewer for a little bit of time, especially if you get a system design question. How are you coming up with the solution in under a second? You're probably not. Take the time to think through the solution and start to create the steps of your answer and what you want to focus in on. So let's flip the coin. What I really want to do is let's focus in on some of these soft skills, these communication skills, and really take the time to talk through a few sample questions at a really high level for how you're going to have success. So let's talk through them at a very high level. I tried to prioritize them, but they're all important. So they're going to include things like being aware, having good awareness, absolutely being empathetic, patient, trustworthy, collaborative, making sure your communication is very clear, that it's supportive, constructive, and very respectful, that it is actually productive too, that you can be adaptable and flexible, that you can be resilient, and you can hold yourself accountable. Another really, really critical item. So let's go right into user focus. And this is going to include other engineers, cross-functional stakeholders, and absolutely those external users as well. And so I also just want to kind of quickly note that, hey, if it's an external versus internal facing product, the way you handle things would be a little bit different. Let's just go fundamentals here. So let's start with a behavioral question, and let's start with a behavioral question working with cross-functional internal stakeholders. Very common question would be, tell me about a time the product team had unrealistic expectations. Obviously a very common scenario. And as always, when speaking with non-engineers, just make sure you're always thinking about how you're communicating technical concepts to a potentially non-technical audience, even though some product managers are pretty technical. So when outlining the answer to this question, in our situation, in our task, specifically in the task, you might highlight, let me tell you how patience over a 2-month span really helped us have success. So you're going to start to sprinkle these words in so that they can see that you have those positive communication skills. Then, as you get into your actions, really stay focused in on collaboration, not only what you did to collaborate, but specifically how you did it. What did you do to stay supportive and productive? And then how did you go about it? And then maybe when you're talking about the testing phases or execution phases, how did you stay adaptable and flexible to help the product team to ultimately get it done, but also allow them to have a little bit more realistic expectations? And then when you get into the results, it's critical to highlight the benefits of these actions. Now, you can start with something like we got it launched on time within budget, but you really want to talk about how maybe taking an empathetic approach created a stronger relationship with the product team, really allowed it to be released on time, on budget, etc. And, sprinkled throughout here, you can be talking about how you worked on the overall architecture, how you worked on the requirements, etc. But the primary focus should continue to come back to communication as much as it can. So let's flip the coin and focus on soft skills when answering a hypothetical question. And let's focus in this one on external users. So you might get a question such as, how do you handle performance issue complaints from external product users? Our foundation is clarification. This is always going to show your strong communication skills. So we might try and narrow down, who are those users? Are they individual users, or are we talking about corporate users? Are they domestic complaints, or are they coming from global, or both? Is the type of product, is it just a software-based product, or is it a physical product? And then maybe, are we actually talking about a brand new product, or is this just maybe a new feature, for example? Then we have the opportunity to create a strong framework. Maybe we do focus heavily on communication by talking about collaboration, trust, respect, listening, etc. Next, after our framework, we want to bring in those assumptions. So we're either going to confirm what our interviewer answered for us, and if they didn't answer, maybe we're just doubling down on the communication skills and we're saying, hey, we're assuming it's a domestic individual user and they're upset with a new feature on our app. Again, very common. Then you start to walk through the steps you would take to listen, to data gather, and work through those specific challenges. You're going to bring in those technical components, of course, but walk through what are those communication steps if you had a new feature that had performance issues, so you can bring it out to the external user, but also talk a little bit about that communication and collaboration internally to get it done as well. And these assumptions, whenever you make these assumptions, this is just going to help you narrow your focus so you know how to talk through those communication items. Let's flip again. Let's go back to behavioral question. Let's go back to internal colleagues, but now I want to focus in on working with other engineers. For example, another very common question would be, tell me about a time you had to collaborate with other engineers to deliver on a critical initiative. Again, very common scenario. So when outlining the situation and task, specifically in the task, talk about being supportive and respectful. So it could be, let me tell you what I did over 2 sprints to be very supportive and respectful of my other team members to get it done. In your actions, stay focused in on the critical communication items, but this is where we really want to start to bring in more engineering-based items. So maybe you're going to be talking through code reviews or testing, but bring those words up constantly. And then maybe you talk about collaboration, but you talk about collaboration when trying to maintain the code, make sure the code is usable, efficient, consistent, etc. And take that back and forth. Go back and forth between communication and technical. So you're really talking about what you did, and then how you did it. So how you did it is going to be a little bit of a mix of that communication and technical piece. So with the results, when you get to the results, you're going to highlight not only how this strong communication helped you achieve your goals, but start to think about repeatability. Did this help you update any processes? Did this become just a repeatable item that you used from a communication standpoint that you learned during this? So a couple of items to think about. Lastly, let's go into the one item we haven't talked about yet. So we've talked a little bit about body language. a little bit about verbal communication. Now let's talk a little bit about written communication. This is going to come up in the questions too as a software engineer. So let's go with something really, really open-ended. How do you make sure your written communication is clear and concise? This question's pretty open-ended. So again, strong communication skills are going to come with clarification. Are we talking about reference docs? Are we talking about design docs? Or is this an email? Is my intended audience technical or non-technical? That is a critical question. Is it internally facing or externally facing? We have to know, because what we can share internally will be different externally and sound different. Then we might want to just understand urgency to kind of push our answer. Then in the framework, maybe this time we go with a little bit more of a hybrid framework. So we bring in a couple communication skills like awareness and accountability, but then we bring in two very important items like readability and accessibility in terms of that written communication. And as we pivot to our assumptions, of course, if they answer our questions, great, but if they don't, let's assume something very common like code comments for other engineers, and assume a scenario where these items would be really, really critical. They're always critical, but then just assume that one scenario again as an engineer where you really know you'd have to break it down in terms of how you're writing out all that communication and why it's so important. I know with all these answers, I'm keeping it pretty high level because I'm not a software engineer and I don't want to get into the weeds, but what I really want you to be thinking about is what's the combination of bringing in these technical skills and these soft communication skills that are going to absolutely help you crush these answers. Remember that a large percentage of our communication is nonverbal, so you've got to be thinking about the body language item as well. Next, check out this old video that I did on just some of the basic software engineer interview fundamentals that are going to be critical for your success. Good luck.